My name is Lily Shaw. I was born in China, and in 1948, my family moved to Taipei, Taiwan. An island was part of the China mainland. And I was in the sixth grade when I went there, and then I went through high school. And after I graduated from high school, I was fortunate to have a nursing scholarship that was awarded to me from Maryview Hospital School of Nursing in Portsmouth, Virginia. So I came to the United States to advance my education, and my parents were very supportive, and they feel this would be a good career choice for me, even though I didn't know anything about nursing. So when I went to Virginia, it was a Catholic hospital, and we had the 3-year diploma nursing education. Right after I finished in 1958, I moved to New York to start my baccalaureate degree in nursing. And many of the nuns went to St. John's University, a Catholic university in New York City, and I too decided I would enroll there. And after 3 years of part-time study, I finished my baccalaureate degree, and I was working at the same time. So I went back to Portsmouth, Virginia to give back the generous gift that they gave me for the 3 years I studied there. So I taught basic nursing for a year, and I decided I would take midwifery as my graduate study, even though at the time I knew very little about maternity nursing and midwifery. However, when I moved back to North, I decided I didn't have enough savings to go to Columbia because the tuition was $1,000 a semester, and our salary was only $4,000 a year. So it took a lot to get our tuition paid and living expenses included. So I taught another year of maternity nursing in New Jersey. While I was teaching there, I was very fortunate because the National League for Nursing has its own state nursing convention for the educators. And that year, the person that spoke at the convention was Sister Mary Stella, who was a nurse midwife, and she talked about the family-centered maternity nursing. And I was so awed and so inspired by her philosophy, the way she talked about how maternity care could be changed in our country. And she said, we have to have maternity nursing. We need to get mothers and babies together after birth because that's one unit and that's their own babies. Why should we put them in a central nursery? Now, I thought, what a wonderful idea. And of course, I was very impressed with nurse midwives' values and the way they practiced and behaved. So at the time, I was already admitted to Columbia University. So I was very happy that I made the choice right then and there. So the next year, I went to Columbia. And even though the practice of midwifery was so limited, and at the time there were only 2 hospitals in New York City that hired midwives. One was Kings County Hospital in Brooklyn, the other was at Cumberland, that's another city hospital, very close by to Kings County Hospital. So as a student, the Columbia group, we went to Kings County Hospital to do our clinical in the summer because we had very limited opportunities to practice midwifery at Sloan Hospital for women. And Yale University's program, their students came in the summer as well. So we had a very large group from the end of May till the end of August, and we were there together. We had Ernestine Wiedenbach, the chairperson of the Yale program, and she came every week to hold seminar with us. And she talked about the philosophy of midwifery. She talked about what we can do as midwives for our maternity patients. So it was a very, very interesting time for me as a student. So when I finished my training at Columbia, I decided I better take an internship. And I was very lucky because Maternity Centers Association's program offered internship in conjunction with Kings County Hospital for the first time. So I took a 6-month internship program there. I was very, very lucky because at the time, Kings County Hospital had a huge volume of maternity patients, and we had close to 7,000 deliveries a year. So it was a tremendous experience for us as novice. And after I finished the 6 months internship, there was a vacancy at the maternity center school. So I was invited to join the faculty. And I thought I would go abroad to work as a consultant. I was so naive. I had so little experience. I don't know why I thought I could be a maternal consultant. And it took World Health Organization 6 months to approve my application from Geneva. So I was assigned, of all the countries, to Iraq. Naturally, I already had the job, so I decided I'll stay. So I served as a faculty at the Maternity Center Association School for many, many years. And by 1976, the State University of New York took over the financial as well as the administrative responsibilities for that education program. So then I was a faculty at the State University of New York at Downstate Medical Center. And as a faculty member, I really was very fortunate. I learned so much from the 3 directors. The first director was Hetty Hemschmeyer. However, I only saw her one time, very briefly, when I went to New Haven for a picnic hosted by Ernestine Wiedenbach at our graduation. She, at the time, had already retired. She had a snow-white hair, and she waved at us when we went by her house, and she had a beautiful dog. So that was the only time I saw her. Then I worked with Marion Strachan, who was the second director of Maternity Center School in the history of that education program. And she retired in 1970. And the third director was Lorette Beck. And then I followed their footsteps after these 3 directors of midwifery school. I became a director, yes. First, I was a faculty member for many years, and then I served as a director for 18 years. I think the most rewarding experience for me as a teacher was that not only we kept Maternity Center School and its tradition in a very quality way, and our academic and clinical practice for students were really excellent, and it was nationally well known for its excellence. When we graduate our practitioners, people from all over the United States would request our graduates to start midwifery education program or service programs. So I was very proud of that. I think our foremothers and pioneers, they had a dream. Their dream was Maternity Center School started as a certificate program, and they always wanted to have the master's degree, a graduate program, you know, with a public health focus. And however, it took almost 60 years. By 1996, we finally had a 2-year master's degree program. So I felt really good that I fulfilled the dreams of our pioneers. Well, I think it was an accident in a way, and it was my good fortune that I met Sister Mary Stella at that the state conference in New Jersey. And she was so inspiring. And I was lucky years and years later, I met her in Mississippi and Alabama. She was working as a supervisor in one of the nursing jobs, and I told her she actually was inspired me to go into midwifery. And I had applied to Columbia's program, and I didn't know why I applied because one of my classmates decided she was a public health nurse. She wanted to go into midwifery because she was in the Air Force Reserve, and she had a friend who was a reserve a nurse, and she went to maternity center school. And she had deliveries at Kings County Hospital, so my girlfriend was very impressed. She said, "We have to go to midwifery." So that's how I went into midwifery. I only practiced in my role as a faculty, which means that I was with students in a clinical area and in their rotations every single time that they went to clinical. During early days, we only had Kings County Hospital as our clinical practice site, so we were with them 3 shifts a day, and we were in clinical at least 3 days a week, and the fourth day that we did classroom work with our students. So many of my graduates, I actually knew them personally and professionally very well because we were with them. Working as a nurse midwife in New York State, we had lots of challenging times. And I remember when, soon after I graduated from Columbia in 1964, we were working under the sanitation code. We did not have our own midwifery law. By 1992, the midwifery law finally became legalized. In this law, it does not say anything about whether a midwife needs to be a nurse or a non-nurse. We decided it was time for us to have nurses and non-nurses practice midwifery. And midwifery is midwifery, no matter whether you're a nurse or not nurse. Before we started the certified midwifery program, we decided to do a little research, and we applied from the A.C.N.M Foundation for funding to do a pilot project to try to compare the process and outcome of the nurse midwives and midwives, the way that they go through the education process. And it was a good thing that we did that research project because later on, when the certified midwives needed their accreditation, and when the program needed its accreditation, we had to go to the state education department at the federal level to apply for this. And it was a good thing we did the research project. And then we had some evidence to show that indeed there was no difference in the way they were educated, in the way they practiced. Well, when I started to become a midwife, I was, the American College Nurse Midwife was only 9 years old. So I worked in New York State for most of my career in midwifery. And we practiced under the sanitation code. And that was quite a difficult thing. So early on, there were only 2 hospitals that midwives were able to practice. One was Kings County Hospital. The other one was Cumberland Hospital. Both were municipal hospitals in New York. And as a faculty member, we had to have our midwifery permit, a legal document, renewed every year. And we had to be interviewed by one of the physicians, Dr. Weisel, at the health department. And not only we had to be interviewed to make sure that we were practicing within the law, we also, he also had us to submit physical examination findings every year. And we had to have our serology for syphilis, as well as tuberculosis test and all of that. And the obstetricians, they didn't have to do all of that. And we have to have personal interview with the Dr. Weisel. So that was pretty depressing. However, we had to endure that. And later on, in the late 70s, we were practicing under the state health department. It's another sanitation code. We did not have our own law. Not until 1992 did we have our Midwifery Practice Act. And so we were part of the 42 professions in the state, such as medicine, occupational therapy, physical therapy. They all are part of the professionals. We were just like them. So today, the Midwifery Practice Act is the only one in the 50 states that we have our own practice act. Many of the other midwives, nurse midwives, around the country, they practice either under the Medical Practice Act or Nurse Practice Act. So we were quite proud, even though it was late coming into New York State. Because I think it has something to do with the autonomy. Even though the early days in the 90s that we had to have physicians, we call them, the term is not really standing orders, but they have to approve our standing orders, what we could or could not do. We had to have consultations for a variety of the midwifery's practice. And that barriers have all vanished now because the Board of Midwifery, we worked very hard on the board. And we have like 14 midwives on the board, and we have 3 or 4 physicians. We have an obstetrician, a pediatrician, general practitioner, a consumer on the board. So we have a lot more autonomy than many of the nurse midwives around the country. It was very good to have the midwifery board at the state level. We felt we finally have arrived. It took many years. One of the joys I had was in 14 years ago, I actually started one-day practice, midwifery practice, in a, we call the Chinatown Clinic, which was a part of St. Vincent's Hospital's outreach clinic in Canal Street, Chinatown, because we had so many immigrants, Chinese immigrants, and many of whom do not speak English. And since I do speak fluent Mandarin, I was able to work there one day a week because I still had my teaching positions with the State University of New York in Brooklyn. So I felt privileged to work with the low-income immigrant women one day a week, and I continued to practice even after I retired. And it was a very good thing. I felt very satisfied, even though my practice came very late in life. After my retirement in 2002, I went to Japan to work as a consultant, curriculum consultant, and I actually taught there. And I have actually continued with one of the first graduate nurse midwifery program in Japan, in Sapporo, Hokkaido. So even till this day, I go from 1 month to 2 months a year to work with their graduate students. I also had an opportunity to introduce accreditation process to the Japanese midwives. And today, there are 9 graduate nurse midwifery programs in Japan. In the last 10 years, I worked with them. So it was a very rewarding experience for me. And they really welcomed the American midwifery. They learned a great deal from the way we practice and the way that we had our philosophy and values in midwifery. I do not know the exact number, but I wish we had more Asian midwives. For some reason, many of the young Asian, the second or third generation Asians, they don't seem to go into midwifery, even though there are quite a few numbers of men and women, they enter into the profession of nursing. So I think it's probably less than 1% of the nurse midwives or midwives in United States are Asian in origin. Before my retirement, I worked at State University, New York, Downstate Medical Center, and we did have a few Asian students and graduates, and some of them are still practicing, but really we should have more Asian midwives and nurse midwives in our profession. I don't think there were any great regrets. I think I had more satisfaction in my career and in my practice. I had a long career in midwifery, span almost 40 years and, going to almost 50 years. And I learned so much from our pioneers and so many committed nurse midwives around the country. I think I had more joy and I learned so much because I was in the division accreditation for more than 10 years. I was on the board of midwifery. And I also served as associate editor for the Journal of Midwifery. When I first graduated from Columbia, I was drafted into as a committee member for the Bulletin of American College of Nurse Midwives. That came out 4 times a year. That publication became the Journal of Nurse Midwifery, and I served there. In the late 80s, early 90s, that journal changed its name to Journal of Nurse Midwifery, Journal of Midwifery and Women's Health. So I actually served on that committee for 40 years. So I would say that was a great learning experience for me. So I don't think I had any major regrets. I think the only regrets I had was that we did not move fast enough. And another thing that I observed was early on, in the early 1970s, we were really second-class citizens to obstetricians. And Betty Carrington, you will be taping her. She was the vice president of the A.C.N.M at the time. She attended the first meeting with the obstetricians. And in the last few years, our president of the A.C.N.M sat around the table with the board members of the American College of Obstetrician and Gynecologists. So we have moved a great deal. We moved forward, and I think we had the respect of the obstetricians and gynecologists. Especially in New York State, we had representatives from the District 2 OBGYN Association on our board, and it was wonderful to interact with them actively, and they respected us a great deal for what we have achieved. I would say the heart of midwifery is that our women expect us to be competent, knowledgeable, and be their advocate, And they want us to have a trusting relationship with them, not just decline and provide a relationship. They want to have that trust and respect. It is very important we know what they want. It's not what we want. They're giving the birth. We're there to assist them. We should never forget. And another important thing is that we need to do a lot of follow-up when we have them as a family. It's very important that we follow them up. We don't know everything. We have consultants, but we have our own competence, and we know the philosophy and values of midwifery, and we know that it is important. We have to have the trust relationship, and we care, and we have to be compassionate with our families. And I say that is the heart of midwifery. And I think when you have that in mind, you would feel rewarded and satisfied. It's the giving and not the receiving that really makes you feel good about you as a professional. Well, after my retirement in 2002, I served as a consultant to the Japanese midwives, and I introduced the accreditation process that we used, and I also had an opportunity to work with them to show them the modular curriculum of learning, which they adopted. And I did a lot of continuing education for the practicing midwives. And today, I still teach at Tennessee College courses on physical examination, physical assessment, midwifery education, and a lot of our values and philosophies of the American College of Nurse Midwives were introduced to the Japanese, even though they have their own wonderful culture. However, they see the other side of the coin, and they were very pleased that they felt that our view broadens the way that they think, feel, and do. So they were very pleased. In fact, I'm going there sometimes in May for 3 weeks, and I will be teaching their graduate students. When I went there 10 years ago, they were the first. Tennessee College was the first university program to have graduate nurse midwifery. And today there are 9 additional university programs that's on the master's level. So I feel really great that they see the value of advanced midwifery education. I would say I learned so much from our pioneers. I always value my reading of the literature, their viewpoints, their philosophy, how midwives think, work, and do things very differently. And that's something that's very, very valuable. I had many role models that I didn't have in nursing education, which I really value. And people would say, what's so different that nurse midwives from the nurses? I would say they always have the clients, the customers, their patients in their mind. And they think about them, they follow them, they treat them not as their patients, they treat them as equals. And I think that's a very valuable lesson I learned in life. I feel I'm very lucky that I entered midwifery as my profession.